Good evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, January 3rd. Another big-name Liberal has announced that they will not be running in the next election. Toronto MP Marco Mendicino said that the move comes with family in mind and certain encouragement to play a leadership role in Toronto. The former high-ranking cabinet minister also noted that he's had disagreements with the direction the Trudeau government was going on certain affairs, including the Israel-Hamas war. Mr. Mendicino says that he plans to stay on as a Liberal MP until the next election is held. Industry Minister Francois Philippe Champagne says families should make their own decision about whether to continue using TikTok as the company battles Ottawa's order to close TikTok's Canadian offices. The app will remain available in Canada despite the order to shut down the company's Canadian operations. Mr. Champagne is not disclosing what his own family is planning to do, saying he doesn't want to give advice based on his own personal experience. China's foreign ministry says Canada is in no position to lecture others on human rights. It's accusing Canada of hypocrisy for criticizing Beijing's human rights record, pointing to the systemic racial discrimination and unfair treatment that Indigenous peoples face. The response came after Ottawa sanctioned 8 Chinese officials that it has accused of grave human rights violations against ethnic and religious minorities and voiced concerns about democracy in Hong Kong. Canada cited reports of arbitrary and violent detainment of Uyghur people, as well as repression toward Tibetans and Falun Gong practitioners. South Korean investigators have left the president's official residence after nearly 6-hour standoff. President Yoon Suk-yeol has resisted investigators' attempts to question him for weeks concerning a political crisis that has paralyzed South Korean politics and seen 2 heads of state impeached in under a month. The country's anti-corruption agency is weighing charges of rebellion after Mr. Yoon, apparently frustrated that his policies were blocked by an opposition-dominated parliament, declared martial law on December 3rd. The German and French foreign ministers have traveled to Damascus to send a clear signal that a political new beginning between Europe and Syria is possible. They met the leaders of the group that toppled former Syrian President Bashar Assad and representatives of Syrian civil society. Damascus has recently experienced a flurry of visits from Arab and Western countries that had cut off relations with Assad's government during the country's nearly 14-year civil war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says it won't be possible to end the almost 3 years of war with Russia in one day, as Donald Trump claimed during his election campaign he could do. Mr. Zelensky called the incoming U.S. president strong and unpredictable. He says that those qualities can be a decisive factor in his policy approach to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mr. Trump hasn't publicly fleshed out his policy on Ukraine, but his previous comments have put a question mark over whether the United States will continue to be Ukraine's biggest military backer. Authorities say that the highly decorated soldier inside the Tesla Cybertruck that burst into flames outside President-elect Donald Trump's Las Vegas hotel shot himself in the head before the explosion.
Identification of this individual. We also discovered through the coroner's office that the individual had sustained a gunshot wound to the head prior to the detonation of the vehicle. One of the handguns was found at his feet inside of the vehicle.
Officials say that the man likely planned to cause more damage, but the steel-sided vehicle absorbed much of the force of the explosion. The Pentagon said that he had served in the Army since 2006, risen through the ranks, and was on approved leave when he died. Donald Trump is expected to hold a big Washington rally the day before he's sworn in as the nation's 47th president. The victory rally, as it's being billed, will be held at the Capital One Arena in the District of Columbia on January 19th. Mr. Trump has always preferred rally-styled events where he can freewheel and joke with his supporters. He'll be inaugurated at the U.S. Capitol on January 20th. The rally is indoors as Mr. Trump's big outdoor events were limited in the months following an assassination attempt. The arena seats roughly 20,000 people. All right, stay with us. Up next, Bourbon Street in New Orleans reopens to the public following the attack on New Year's Day when a truck drove into a crowd. And infectious disease experts are sounding the alarm over a BC teen's case of avian flu. After that, we'll have our weekly energy update. So don't go anywhere. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. Green Party leader Elizabeth May decided to not hold back today in a press briefing regarding Canada-U.S. relations and specifically Donald Trump.
And when we approach a president-elect who has, astonishingly, decided that a first order of business is Canada bashing, this is unique. I've been thinking back over previous presidents, can't think of a single U.S. president who has ever thought a good way to start a relationship with their single largest trading partner is by insulting us. Well, never mind. We have to prepare for a president-elect. We've got today being January 3rd, 17 days and counting till the inauguration, where we're promised an onslaught of punishments and abuses. Probably not, maybe not, but there's things we can do as Canadians to make sure we protect our economy and our society. That's our job. What he does, that's up to him.
Ms. May continued with saying that she took offense to Mr. Trump's remarks about Wayne Gretzky becoming prime minister, emphasizing, quote, Canada doesn't work that way.
No, sorry. And I really also take offense, sorry, Mr. Trump, took offense to your idea that Pierre Poilievre wasn't good enough to lead the Conservatives. Wayne Gretzky, I mean, he's great. He is the great one. He skates to where the puck is going. It's not going to MAGA. The puck is on a Canadian ice rink. And by the way, Mr. Trump, please, before making public pronouncements that Wayne Gretzky should run for prime minister, give yourself or get yourself a briefing on the nature of parliamentary democracy, a Westminster parliamentary system, and a constitutional monarchy where no one runs for prime minister. We have elections for members of parliament. We don't get to pick and choose among our billionaire friends for who gets a seat at the cabinet table.
New Orleans' famous Bourbon Street is once again open to the public after a truck drove into a crowd of people celebrating the new year.
To be in that number, now when the saints go marching in.
We're doing it to memorialize all those innocent people who lost their lives to this senseless act of terrorism. But more importantly, we want people to know that we're proud to be American. I'm proud to be a Louisianan, and I'm proud to be a New Orleans, and that we open. We're not afraid. We're not going to be scared, and we refuse to be terrorized.
A police spokesperson says new vehicle barricades have been installed on the street and additional police patrols have been ordered for the French Quarter district. 14 people were killed in the New Year's attack and dozens were wounded. The FBI now says that the pickup truck driver responsible for the deadly rampage acted alone.
But at this point, currently, and this is another fact I want to be clear on, we do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack is involved in this attack except for Shamsa Din Jabbar, the subject you've already been briefed on. At this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS.
Alarm bells are sounding over a case of a BC teen and the avian flu. Infectious disease experts say that the virus appears to be evolving, potentially making it more capable of infecting humans. Canadian health officials say that the genome sequencing procedure showed 3 mutations in the 13-year-old's case, including genes mutated to facilitate viral entry into cells in the human respiratory tract and enable viral replication. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says work is underway on a bill aimed at protecting provincial elections from foreign interference, forged images, and other threats. Mr. Kinew says that he has seen draft legislation already, and a bill will probably be introduced in the legislature this spring. Provincial law already allows for fines and jail time for people who spread false information about candidates or impersonate election officials. Manitoba's chief electoral officer has said that the law should be expanded to also ban false information about election officials, the electoral procedures, and the equipment used in elections. All right, don't go anywhere. Coming up, a new study suggests that proactive mitigation is needed to deal with the threat of fires caused by climate change. After that, we'll have our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Then we're going to get to the World Juniors and the upset that Team Canada faced that not many people are happy with. And the Ontario government says that 9 supervised drug consumption sites are set to close and they're going to become treatment hubs. Don't go anywhere. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. Proactive mitigation is needed to deal with the forest fire threat posed by climate change. That's according to a new study that suggests Canadian forests are increasingly primed for severe wildfires by dry forest fuel. The study co-author and Canadian Forest Service scientist says that there were on average an additional 2 days conducive to high severity fires from 2000 to 2020 compared to the previous 2 decades. The study, published in the journal Science, looked at fire severity from 1981 to 2020. The Manitoba government has reinstated the provincial fuel tax after a year-long holiday, but an independent member of the legislature says the NDP government has yet to fulfill another gas tax promise. Mark Wasilou, who was kicked out of the NDP caucus last year, says that the government has not followed through on a pledge to regulate gas prices. The NDP promised in their 2023 election campaign to give the Public Utilities Board the power to regulate fuel prices, similar to the boards in Quebec and the Maritime provinces. Now it's time for Forum Daily's weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Take it away, Dan.
Well, hello, Teresa, and Happy New Year to you and our entire audience. 2025 is with us, and with that comes, of course, a resettling of the markets. We're already starting to see big rallies. Markets are now starting to say, well, maybe there won't be so much of this ESG stuff, and maybe we can't continue using the excuse of Chinese demand or the suspicion that EVs are somehow going to take over gas-powered engines anytime soon, especially with the United States saying no way to EV mandates. Americans are not going to be forced into vehicles, and I suspect a new government in Canada is going to follow the same way. So what we're looking at is a recorrection of market attitudes. Not only are markets now being told you better invest in oil and gas and other things, or you'll hit antitrust sanctions, we're now starting to see large banks in the United States now moving away from their ESG woke mandates, and their woke capitalist approaches have completely crumbled in front of them. Has news for in Canada as well, because of course it means that Mark Carney's Glasgow Financial Alliance on net zero is going up in smoke. Unless Mr. Carney and his friend Michael Bloomberg and others want to face significant, serious, predictable antitrust sanctions, which of course we don't have here in Canada because they have a lip-wristed kind of society institution in which the flavor of the day always goes for something. The reality is that these large banking, financial investment institutions are being told you better back off and you better start lending and you better not pick and choose and play this green game, because if you do, you're going to be faced with some significant fines and penalties and even criminal sanctions. The Americans mean business. They broke Rockefeller's back a century ago. They'll do it again, and they've done it many times since. So that aside, it really means that gasoline prices have nowhere to go but up. And yes, we're a couple of weeks away from the Trump administration and President Trump putting his hand on the Bible and, of course, being sworn in as the next president. With that will come sanctions on Iran, will come sanctions on Venezuela, and the games around, subsidies towards green things are simply going to disappear. And with colder temperatures, it looks like perhaps arguably the coldest we've seen in many years. Some are suggesting 30 years. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. I'm not a weather expert, but if we can't predict prices, weather in a couple of months, how the heck we're going to predict what they're going to be in 10 or 15 years? That's the climate nonsense that we've had to face for the past few years. Thankfully, that's coming to a serious end, not only in the United States, but right here in Canada. The sooner, of course, the better. What it means is that gas prices in Canada are going to continue to rise, as will diesel. We've seen diesel move up about 8 cents a liter across the board, across Canada, since the couple of days before December, Christmas Day. And of course, we're looking at the possibility of gasoline moving up another 4 or 5 cents a liter this time next week. So look for an average of $1.58.9, meaning Vancouver, you're back to $1.85. Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton, $1.35 to $1.42. Edmonton being the cheaper part. Saskatchewan, of course, always stays firm, but will move up a little higher. Manitoba, of course, saw the restoration of the 14-cent gas provincial sales tax. That's going to go up another 3 or 4 cents a liter to about $1.43. Ontario, $1.58. Quebec, $1.68 in the Maritimes. But you're looking for another 7-cent increase on the gasoline side this time next week. That's it for this week, Teresa. Lots to talk about as the year goes on.
Thanks for that, Dan. Again, that was Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, with Forum Daily's weekly energy update. All right, stay with us. Coming up, we'll have more of today's top national and international headlines. An annual ranking of North American airlines on time ratings has been released, with WestJet and Air Canada at the bottom of the list. 9 supervised drug consumption sites in Ontario are set to be turned into treatment hubs, and Team Canada suffers a defeat at the World Juniors. Stay tuned. Data provider Cirium has released its annual ranking of North American airlines that has WestJet and Air Canada at the bottom of the pack. Cirium says that WestJet and Air Canada had on-time ratings that were under 72%. In addition, Aeromexico is the most on-time airline in the world, with nearly 87% of the airline's flights arriving on time in 2024. The Ontario government says that 9 supervised drug consumption sites that are set to close will become treatment hubs. The sites in Toronto, Ottawa, Hamilton, Kitchener, Guelph, and Thunder Bay will turn into homelessness and addiction recovery treatment hubs by the end of March. Adam Zivo from the Centre for Responsible Drug Policy joined us for his view on the closures.
So Ontario has determined that supervised consumption sites should not operate within 200 meters of any schools, daycares, or similar facilities that attend to children. And that makes sense because, as we've seen through extensive media reporting, these sites fuel crime and open drug use. This is something that was exemplified by the South Riverdale site in Toronto, where neighbors reported that drug dealers would openly sell drugs around the site, that police refused to enforce the law around the site as well. And eventually a young mother was shot when 2 drug dealers had an altercation. And shockingly, it turned out that one of the harm reduction workers at this site actually had a romantic relationship with this dealer and tried to assist him with escaping justice and lied to the police about this. So given this context, obviously supervised consumption sites have not worked out in the way that was promised. And so the Ontario government has said that they're going to now invest into recovery centers that focus on shepherding people towards sobriety, or at least towards better treatment, for example, methadone or Suboxone, rather than simply enabling their addiction. And the idea here is to combine homeless services and addiction services to ensure that people's needs are holistically met. And I think that given the current political climate in Canada, this move makes a lot of sense. Harm reduction activists often claim that supervised consumption sites save many lives. The data behind that can sometimes be contentious, partially because the KPIs that are used by supervised consumption sites have often been fudged. So, for example, in the early 2000s, Canada launched Insight, which was the first supervised consumption site in the country, and 30 evaluations were produced suggesting that Insight was a massive success. But then when an external evaluator reviewed those evaluations, they found that essentially the data had been fudged to grossly underestimate the crime impacts and to grossly exaggerate the number of referrals to recovery. So, for example, in Insight, if someone gave you a pamphlet that indicated what recovery services were nearby, that was counted as a referral, regardless if you just threw the pamphlet away 30 seconds later. That problem has been quite consistent. So when people say that supervised consumption sites shepherd thousands of people to treatment, that doesn't actually seem to be true. In fact, I've interviewed workers at these sites who say that they've seen no actual referrals to recovery, and that KPIs have been fudged to increase, recovery referrals. So, for example, by saying, okay, we have recovery referrals plus other services, combining those 2 KPIs into one to hide the fact that one KPI has 0 referrals. Now, there isn't any strong evidence base so far behind the Ford government's more, new recovery-oriented approach. But at the same time, we've seen that the current status quo just isn't working. Overdose deaths have been going up precipitously year after year. So it's time to try something new. And we have seen that a recovery-oriented system in Alberta works, that Alberta has seen a significant decrease in overdoses, I think approximately 30%, which is far greater than what we've seen in British Columbia, where I think the number is only 9%. And so if this system is conscientiously modeled around the lessons learned in Alberta, I think that even if there isn't a formal evidence base yet, that there is reason to be optimistic.
Team Canada suffered a major defeat at the World Juniors, losing to Czechia 4-3. The Czechs scored on the power play late in the third period to hand Canada its second straight tournament exit without playing for a medal. The Canadian squad never really found their stride at this year's competition held in Ottawa. Team Canada's captain touched on the upset after the game.
It sucks, but can't really do anything about it now. So playing on home soil was unbelievable. The fans were great. Probably the best atmosphere a lot of us have ever played in, but yeah, it sucks the way it did.
I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Good night, Canada.